The Civil Military Emergency Preparedness Program is a program that was created originally by the Office of Secretary of Defense, but which the Corps of Engineers was asked to handle the actual execution of. We started our work in 1998 doing work for the Secretary of Defense, and then a little bit later for Headquarters Department of Army. The real purpose of the program initially was to engage with the countries that had formerly been part of the Warsaw Pact, where we were looking for something that was transparent, that was going to generate goodwill, that was going to provide the opportunity to start to open up relationships between the countries that had been part of the Soviet Union and now were free countries. Disaster management was chosen as a topic that is really quite neutral, where countries work together because there are far more important things to deal with than politics when disasters strike. The Corps of Engineers managed this program, the execution of the program for these two entities up from 1998 until 2011. The program ceased operation in 2011, but right now we're looking at where the lessons that we learned from that particular program might be built upon and where we might move in some new directions, where we can still engage with other countries in the area of capacity building for consequence management with particular emphasis on water resources. Initially, we were strictly dealing with the consequences of all hazards disasters. So we were working natural disasters, technological disasters like Bhopal, and also consequences of acts of terrorism using weapons of mass destruction. But with time, what we started doing was looking for areas that were meeting particular needs that the partner nations we were working with were concerned about. This has been particularly true with many water-related issues. This is a key problem, a growing problem in many parts of the world, one where we think climate change is going to aggravate many problems that we have right now, in some ways very similar to problems that we've had in the past, in other ways with increased coastal storm damage, with saltwater intrusion, with changing in the timing of rainfall, with more intense storms, kinds of things that many countries haven't really had to deal with too much. So we're really looking to, on the one hand, look at risk, reduce risk, work with countries so that people have a better understanding of the residual risk, the risk that remains after you have decided how much you're going to reduce the risk that you have, and also dealing with issues like the effects of multinational water management, where decisions made by one country have impacts on others. The Civil Military Emergency Program, in working with other countries, and we have not done as much in Africa up to this point in time as we think there is an opportunity to do in the future, has largely been at the strategic level. The program recognizes that there are a variety of needs that not only move across all types of disasters, but that range from local response to disasters, the kind of work that first responders do, to more regional disasters, to disasters that require the national government to be involved, to disasters that are multinational disasters. We have really concentrated our work on what happens at the national level and what happens in the multinational realm. So our work really involves becoming involved with those ministries that are working on disaster management. In some cases, these are civil ministries. In some cases, they're the military. When they are civil ministries, if a disaster is large enough, what is typically going to happen is that when the civil capability is overwhelmed, the military is going to be involved in any case. Our program is largely geared towards seeing that the mechanisms that are necessary are in place with regard to disaster planning, with regard to the kind of interaction that needs to occur between ministries if they're going to be cooperating and the kind of cooperation that's necessary between the civil and the military. And when those civil-military relationships become important, to do everything that we can to see that democratic processes that are in place don't disappear in a perceived need for the military to move in because the civil government has in some way failed to meet the needs of the citizens. The way in which what we've done with the Civil Military Emergency Preparedness Program and tried to work in relationship to what happens with regard to stability operations is really to be looking at a whole of government to whole of government approach. It's been very easy in the past to talk about the need for partner nations to be using a whole of government approach, and this is absolutely necessary. But we also think it's critically important that the United States also be using a whole of government approach. It's very easy for Department of Defense to engage with other countries, but if we have Department of Defense only engaging with these countries, we're missing big parts of what the United States can bring to partner nations to help them. So we have been working to try and engage with State Department, with USAID, and with OFTA. In the course of executing the CMEP program, we have worked with other U.S. federal agencies, including other components of Department of Defense. For example, with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency for dealing with the consequences of hazardous and toxic material spills, dealing with Department of Navy when it comes to oil spills in coastal areas, working with the National Guard Bureau when we're trying to deal with all of the levels of government from local to national that need to be involved to have accurate, a complete, holistic disaster response. As part of this, we also see roles not only for other federal agencies, which have been involved in CMEP activities around the world, but also the need to involve academia, to involve non-governmental organizations and international organizations. We have worked with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, for example, to be doing work with ASEAN, to be working in Asia, to be working with the Lower Mekong Initiative for issues on the lower parts of the Mekong River, to be working with the Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center and with UN OCHA in other parts of the world. You know, with regard to other kinds of things which we might be doing, one of the truly interesting and quite different kinds of activities we engaged in was with the government and the Army of Kenya last year, where the project was not so much to prepare for disaster management, but rather to deal with the consequences of disaster management and also to work with the Army specifically. In this particular instance, what we were doing was working with a component of the Kenyan Army, which in many ways is not typical of most African armies because it's really quite advanced. It has a great deal of capability. But what we were doing was working to create a component that might be thought of not so much as a Kenyan Corps of Engineers, but as a Kenyan Corps of Operating Engineers, where there was a group of engineers that was learning how to do horizontal construction, road building, for example, to be doing low-level vertical construction, the building of clinics and schools, or overseeing the construction of clinics and schools, and where it appears that there may be an opportunity to work with other armies in Africa to similarly build corps of operating engineers, which might also be thought of as these armies for good, where there will be components, if we go forward with this concept, of the armies that are really able to go and do the kind of construction that would normally be fostered by non-governmental organizations, which in some cases have been done by the US government as part of humanitarian assistance, but where we are doing a kind of training the trainer, where we're creating units within armies in Africa that are able to carry on, that are able to do this same kind of work as part of their participation in their own army's activities.